Chapter 12. Some more sayings of the sage. How are the conflicting views of men of different religions to be reconciled? The sage said, "The real aim of all religions is to lead up to the awakening to the truth of the self. But the truth of the self is too simple for the generality of men. Even though there is no one who is not aware of the self, men do not care to be told of the self. They think the self to be of little worth. They want to hear of far-off things, such as heaven and hell and reincarnation. They love mystery and not the plain truth. And the various religions humor them, so that ultimately they may come back to the self. But why not seek and find and abide in the self at once, without further wandering? The heavens cannot be apart from him that sees or thinks of them. Their reality is of the same degree as that of the ego that wants to go there. Hence, they do not exist apart from the self, which is the real heaven." The sage's sayings continue. A Christian would not be pleased unless he is told that God is somewhere in a far-off heaven which he cannot reach without divine aid. Christ alone knew God, and he alone can take men to God. The normal Christian, if told the kingdom of heaven is within you, would not take the plain meaning of it, but would read into it a complex and far-fetched meaning. The mature mind alone can grasp and accept the simple and naked truth. The conflict of teachings is only apparent and can be resolved if one practices self-surrender to God. This will lead to the self, to which everyone must come back in the end, because that is the truth. The discord amongst the creeds can never be got rid of by discussing their merits, for discussion is a mental process. The creeds are mental. They exist in the mind alone, while the truth is beyond the mind. Therefore, the truth is not in the creeds. So said the sage. Therefore, we must not set much store by our creeds. On another occasion, the sage declared that a Vedantin, one that has understood the teachings of the Upanishadic lore, can understand what Jesus Christ meant by the kingdom of heaven. He will understand what the Orthodox Christian cannot, namely that the kingdom of heaven spoken of by that sage is just the egoless state. Hence, one should either go beyond the creeds by the quest of the true self, or take to some one of them and hold to it lightly, concentrating all effort on the practice of the methods taught by it. To be zealous for the beliefs inculcated is to be lax in the practice of the method. Even the materialist or atheist has a creed of his own, and there is no practical difference between him and a religious one, except in the purification of the mind that comes by living aright. Hence the sage Varanachala said, "What is the use of asserting or denying that there is a real self, other than the bodies, that it is with form, that it is one, and so on? All these disputes are in the realm of ignorance." On another occasion, the sage said, "The sacred lore is full of volumes, different parts of it being adapted to the needs of different kinds of seekers. Each seeker successfully transcends portion after portion of it. That which he transcends then becomes for him useless and even false. And ultimately, the seeker transcends the whole of it." Original sin. Once the sage was asked about the Christian doctrine of original sin. That is, that every man is born in sin and can be delivered from it only by faith in Jesus Christ. And the sage of Arunachala replied, "The sin is said to be in man, but there is no manhood in sleep. Manhood comes on waking, along with the thought, I am this body. And this I am the body idea, thought, is the real original sin, and must be removed by the death of the ego, after which this thought will not arise." And the sage explained the truth of Christianity as follows. The body is the cross. Ego is Jesus, the Son of Man. And when he is crucified, he is resurrected as the Son of God, which is the glorious real self. One must lose the ego in order to truly live. We may remember here that according to all the sages, the ego life is not truly life, but death. Is there knowledge of the self in the egoless state? The truth about the egoless state is conveyed by the sage by means of negations, when he said, "What is called self-knowledge is that state in which there can be neither knowledge nor ignorance. For what is commonly regarded as knowledge is not true knowledge. The self is itself true knowledge, because it shines alone, without any other that could become an object of its knowledge or a knower of it. Understand that the self, Atman, is not a void." Because the egoless state is not described to us in positive terms, many people are apt to conclude that it is mere nothingness or utter annihilation. This mistake was committed by many of the professed followers of the Enlightened One, Gautama Buddha. The sage here provides against a similar mistake being made by those who might become his disciples by declaring that it is not a void. Since the sage is on a plane where there is neither ignorance nor knowledge, he has no use for learning of any kind. Even the sacred lore does not interest him, though he may read it in order to explain its true and deeper meaning to those who ask him about it. So we can understand the following saying of his: "Even a learned man must bow before an illiterate sage. The illiterate man is simply ignorance. The learned man is learnedly ignorant. The sage also is ignorant, because there is nothing for him to know." On fate or free will, which determines one's life. The person that puts this question expects a categorical answer. He wants to know which of these two is the decisive factor in life, fate or free will. In his writings, the sage answers as follows: "The dispute as to which of the two, fate and human will, is more powerful interests only those that are without enlightenment about the true nature of the ego, from which arise the two notions. He that has that enlightenment has transcended both and is no more interested in the question. To a visitor that put to him a question, the sage replied, "The answer to this question, if given, will be rather difficult to understand. Yet almost everyone asks this question some time or other in his life. One must know the truth of him that seems to be affected or not affected by fate." Here the sage evidently means the ego, since the distinction between fate and free will exists only for the ego mind. The truth of it is inseparable from the truth of the ego, which can be realized only by the quest. Having said this, the sage went on explaining what fate really means when he said, "Fate has a beginning, a cause, and that is action, and that cannot be without free will. Free will being therefore the first cause, it is the predominant factor, and by cultivating free will one can conquer fate." Cultivating free will implies the process of inquiry and the quest taught by the sage, or in the alternative, surrendering of oneself to God as the one reality. As the sage said, what is commonly known as self-reliance is nothing but ego-reliance, and hence worsens bondage. Reliance on God is alone true self-reliance, because God is the self. Is not a guru necessary? It is the common belief of the religiously minded that everyone that aspires to the state of deliverance must in due course find and attach himself to a guru. The sage was asked by someone as to whether this belief is correct, and he gave the following reply: "So long as one thinks of himself as little, he must take hold of the great, the guru. He must not, however, look upon the guru as a person. For the sage is never other than the real self of the disciple. When that self is realized, then there is neither guru nor disciple." This question arose because the sage of Arunachala himself had no guru, at least in the general sense, at least no outer guru. On another occasion, the sage said, "A teacher would be needed if one had to learn something new, but this is a case of unlearning." How to overcome the worries of life. A visitor said, "I suffer from worries without end. There is no peace for me, though there is nothing wanting for me to be happy." And the sage asked, "Do these worries affect you in sleep?" The visitor admitted that they did not, and the sage asked him again, "Are you the very same man now, or are you different from him that slept without any worry?" "Yes, I am the same person." "Then surely those worries do not belong to you. It is your own fault if you assume that they are yours." Meditation and mind control. The sage said, "Meditation is a battle, for it is the effort to keep hold of one thought to the exclusion of all else. Other thoughts arise and try to sink that thought. When the latter gains strength, the others are put to flight. Breath regulation, pranayama, is for him that cannot directly control his thoughts. It serves as a brake serves a car, but one should not stop with breath regulation. After its purpose is gained, which is the quieting of the mind's restlessness, one must take up the practice of concentration. And in the course of time, concentration will become possible and dispense with the control of breath. The mind will then become quiet as soon as meditation is attempted. And when meditation is well established, it can no more be given up. Meditation will go on automatically, even during work, play, and other activities. Meditation will go on even in sleep. The means for getting well established in meditation is meditation itself. Neither japa nor a vow of silence is necessary. If one takes to selfish worldly activity, there is no good taking a vow of silence. Meditation extinguishes all thoughts, and then the truth alone remains. On another occasion, the sage said, "When camphor burns, no residue is left. The mind must be like camphor. It must melt away and be wholly consumed by the earnest resolve to find and be the real self, Atman. By this resolve, the who am I quest becomes efficacious. When the mind is thus consumed, when no trace of it as mind is left, it has become resolved into the self." Being asked how one can find his guru, the sage said, "By intense meditation." People who look for specific results from meditation but do not get them become discouraged and conclude that meditation has done them no good. To them, the sage said, "It does not matter at all whether these results are attained or not. The attainment of steadiness is the main thing. It is the great gain. Anyhow, they must trust themselves to God and wait for His grace without impatience. The same rule applies to japa, for japa uttered even once does good, whether the person is aware of it or not." Some people imagine that one must go on practicing meditation even after becoming a sage. Light is thrown on this question by the following answer from the sage. When the mind is extinguished in the egoless state, then there is neither concentration nor non-concentration. Referring to the same question, the sage said on another occasion, "When the self is realized, then samadhi can neither be attempted nor given up." Success in meditation comes quickly to a few, and after long practice to others. On this point, the sage once said, "Meditation is impeded by vasanas, the latent tendencies of the mind and affinities of the mind. Hence, it becomes effective through the progressive weakening of the vasanas. Some minds are like gunpowder, which takes fire and is consumed at once. Others are like charcoal, and some others are like wet fuel." The following answer throws light on the secret of mind control when the sage said, the mind cannot be controlled by one that takes it to be something that really exists. In that case, the mind behaves like a thief, pretending to be a policeman running after the thief. Efforts made in this way only serve to give a new lease of life to the ego and the mind. The right method is the inquiry into the truth of the mind and the ego, which leads up to the quest. On another occasion, the sage said, "People ask me how to control the mind. I reply, show me the mind. The mind is no more than the series of thoughts. How can mind be controlled by one of those thoughts, namely the desire to control the mind? It is foolish to seek to end the mind by the mind itself. The only way is to find the mind's source and keep hold of it. Then the mind will fade away of itself." Yoga enjoins repression of thoughts. I prescribe the quest of the self, which is more practical. The mind is repressed in swoon, or as the effect of fasting. But as soon as the cause is withdrawn, the mind revives. That is, the thoughts being to flow as before. So there are just two ways of controlling the mind. Either seek its source, or surrender it to be struck down by the supreme power. Surrender is the recognition of the existence of a higher overruling power. If the mind refuses to help in seeking the source, let it go and wait for its return. Then turn it inwards. No one succeeds without patient perseverance. Meditation with the eyes fixed on the space between the eyebrows, the sage warns us, may result in fear. The right way is to fix the mind on the self alone. This is done without fear. Another thing that we learn is that there can be no meditation, in the usual sense of the term, on the real self. Meditation is usually understood to mean thinking of an object, and this implies a distinction between the subject and the object. Hence, no real meditation of the self is possible. What is called meditation is no more than the dispelling of thoughts, whereby the self is covered over. When all thoughts are dispelled, the self shines in its real nature. And abiding in this state is the only meditation of the real self that is possible. Hence the sage is ever in meditation, though he may seem to be over and otherwise engaged. This is the truth conveyed in the first benedictory verse of the Ulladu Narpadu.